Now this is how we should be using AI. Board games have been played by the human race for millennia. They're a great way to pass the time, connect with friends, and even learn invaluable skills like strategy, budgeting, and lateral thinking. But the problem with board games is if you don't know the rules, you can't play them. Archaeologists have found countless examples of ancient game pieces, dice, and game boards all around the world that date to as far back as 4,000 years ago. Like the royal game of Ur, which, lucky for us, Irving Finkel found the rules for written down on a cuneiform tablet. Some games have endured millennia and we are still playing them today, like Go from China. So we already have the knowledge of how people would have felt whether they won or lost because we can recreate these exact scenarios today. Unfortunately, this is not the case with all ancient board games. But in an article published last month in Antiquity, researchers have claimed to have cracked the code on a previously unknown ancient Roman board game, and they used AI to do it. For years, a slab of limestone sat in a museum in the Netherlands, puzzling experts as to what the incised lines on it could have been. Officially known as Object 04433 in Het Romien Museum in Heerlen, the stone's lines do evoke the idea of a board game, but they don't resemble any known or documented game we know of from ancient Rome, or even one that you or I would play today. While we do have some of the best documentation for ancient games coming from Rome, we should also recognize that this does not encompass the full spectrum of games and play that would have taken place 2,000 years ago, especially across such a wide geographic region when we're thinking of the Roman Empire. Like today, some games are very universally popular and well known, while others are more local, a little bit more niche, and they might not look like a game right away to the eyes of an outsider. Even the most unassuming or mundane objects could have been used for board games, and archaeologists digging them up could just give them a different interpretation based on the context. And thus enters Object 04433. This stone has a unique incised geometric pattern on top of it and dates back to when Heerlen was the Roman settlement of Coriovalum, a Roman town in the province of Germania founded during the reign of Emperor Augustus. It was part of Rome right up until the fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476 CE and is one of the few towns in the Netherlands mentioned in ancient sources. Coriovalum connected two main arteries of the Roman road system, so this place would have been buzzing economically. This is the setting in which our 21 by 14.5 centimeter worked piece of white Jurassic limestone was used. Museum documentation does state that it was found in Heerlen, but there's no other further evidence that provides any clue about its context or its provenance. This kind of rock was a popular choice for architectural decoration in the northern Roman provinces as a substitute for marble, and larger decorative elements of this Norroy limestone have been found in Coriovalum, like funerary monuments, pillars, and inscriptions. So if this stone was used for monuments and architecture, what was someone doing inscribing these mysterious lines on such a small piece? It's likely that this was a reworked piece of stone, either from an offcut, maybe an error in some architectural detail, or maybe someplace was being redeveloped and they no longer needed the stone, so someone took it and redeveloped it into something new. There have been other interpretations for this rock, but given its smooth surface, its intentionally cut geometric lines, and its unusual shape, a board game seems like a logical conclusion. So to test this theory, scientists decided to look at usewear on the object to gain a little bit more insight and help us figure out what it was used for. And from there, they simulated gameplay using AI to see if they could replicate these wear patterns. This is where I see AI being used productively within archaeological research and for reading all those amazing burnt scrolls from Herculaneum, not for stealing art or to make really weird historical reenactments that are 100% inaccurate. Usewear analysis is used to identify the surface damage to an object that occurs when something else comes into contact with it. For example, grinding, cutting. Think of a mortar and pestle. That pestle grinding on the mortar will leave wear marks, no matter how unnoticeable it is to the naked eye. By looking at these wear marks, scientists can determine the function of an object. Some wear marks are easy to spot just by looking at them, but many happen on a microscopic level. This idea of using usewear analysis for studying gameplay is something that is quite novel in the field, which makes these findings even more groundbreaking. The researchers used Roman-era game pieces, even some found at Coriolanum itself, and assumed that objects similar to these glass or stone dome disc-shaped counters would cause the usewear on this limestone game board. Given their shape and size, it's likely that the game pieces would have been pushed along the lines of the board instead of picked up and moved with every go. Think checkers versus chess. You're more likely to pick up something that is taller with enough room to grip and push something that is flatter. And this pushing is what causes abrasion, especially when that game piece is hard glass or stone moving over a soft limestone playing board. The usewear analysis on the game board showed obvious signs that the surface was visibly smoother along one of the diagonal incised lines. Other scientific techniques like photogrammetry that can create a fully textured 3D model, and the photometric stereo technique, which is a computer vision technique that determines the 3D surface shape of an object by analyzing the variations in multiple 2D images of it taken from a single fixed point under different lighting directions, were also used to essentially create a topographical map of the surface of this game board. Speaking in geographical terms, the results showed that there was some shallow valleys not visible to the naked eye. For example, the surface of the board was generally lower around the diagonal lines in comparison to the rest of it. It's very plausible then that this is a board game. Other interpretations for usewear like grinding foodstuffs or pigments don't quite line up with this pattern of use along the lines, and they wouldn't even require these lines in the first place. I would be remiss though if I didn't mention that there is still the entire possibility that other interpretations could come out for the stone that could prove to be the correct one. Maybe it was used for a weird technique in tool making, maybe someone was just practicing making straight lines with a chisel. There are probably countless other ideas, but we're gonna stick to the board game one for now. So now that we have proof that this piece of limestone had repeated wear along these incised lines, and it looks like it could well indeed be a board game, we need to figure out just how to play it. This is where AI comes into play. Literally. To try and learn just how this unknown Roman game was played, researchers enlisted the help of an AI-driven play system called Ludii. Developed as part of the Digital Ludeme project, this software provides us with the possibility to simulate gameplay and determine various rules and systems to generate quantitative data. Ludii also has the largest games database of traditional board game rules currently available, so if you're interested in that kind of stuff, I highly recommend that you check it out. In this instance, it was used to see if the rules of a board game would have resulted in the usewear patterns evident on the surface of the stone. What the researchers did is they made two AI bots play against each other using this stone object as the board, and using various rule sets from different but comparable ancient and old board games that have been found and documented across Europe, such as Herzl from Scandinavia and Gioco dell'Orso from Italy. What Ludii's model does is generate every possible legal move in a game, determining each potential combination for various rule sets. In total, based on the geometric pattern of the lines, there were 6 different possible arrangements for potential game boards and 130 possible game configurations. Then the variables for potential number of game pieces and whether they started on or off the board were calculated, including the potential different orders of the players. I am not a math person, but the potential options and outcomes for each combination of gameplay seems astronomical here. The team ran 1,000 rounds of simulation for each combination of board and rule set, all moving at breakneck speed thanks to the AI software. The report states that each move took about 1 second of processing time, which is still very lengthy. But can you imagine if it had to be done by hand or actually reenacted with 2 people? They'd still be doing it. I am not that much of a board gamer on the best of days, and being tasked with that job probably would have made me never want to touch a game piece for the rest of my life. The researchers even took into account all the various biases that humans might display when playing a game. For example, a right-handed player might be more biased to the right-hand side of the board and choose to play on that area more. Not to mention that where you are sitting in relation to the board might also affect your behavior. The results from these simulations, if we believe that this stone was indeed an ancient board game, determined that the usewear on the board is consistent with those from blocking games. Games whose goal it is to block one's opponent from moving. So it is entirely plausible that this is a new ancient Roman era game that we are finally able to potentially understand. The AI simulations that involved a blocking game in which one player starts with 4 pieces on one vertical side of the main rectangle and attempts to block their opponent's 2 pieces on the opposite side were the ones that both most frequently matched the wear patterns on the stone and produced a playable game. Of course, it goes without saying that there is more than one way to skin a cat, and this is only one potential option of gameplay method. And as with all AI, we need to remember that it is a computer, and it cannot 100% faithfully reconstruct human emotions, reasoning, or actions. We're so much more complex than a machine, and we need to revel in that and celebrate it. The software does run off the rules given to it, but humans break the rules. They change them up depending on the circumstances. Sometimes we even ignore the rules just for fun. We also have to take into account the social and physiological factors that can differ from each player and throughout history. Luckily, with a blocking game such as this that isn't very complex and would generally be very quick gameplay, it's easier for humans to play these sorts of games more optimally and in tandem with how a machine might play it. So in this scenario, there is less of a gap between AI simulations and actual human gameplay. This would be a lot more complicated with a game that involved a little bit more, let's say, human emotion, human reasoning, or different ideas, like Clue, which is my favorite board game, by the way, if anyone's asking. What makes this stone game board so unique and special is that there are no blocking games described in any texts from the Roman era. Blocking games in general are actually incredibly rare in Europe and only begin appearing in documented history during the Middle Ages. That means this new research may push back our evidence for this kind of game by several centuries. And it makes a lot of sense that stuff like this wouldn't be written down, because before we had mass market games that we could simply just buy at the store, simple games were all too often drawn on the ground and played with what was available to them. And since many of these games were so simple, the rules were rarely written down. I might be dating myself here, but think about how you learned different card or dice games in high school or university with new friends. No one gave you a rule book to peruse before playing. You just dove in headfirst and learned on the job while someone was explaining the rules to you as you went along. All of this is oral history that can be lost so easily if it's not passed or written down. And that is essentially what Object 04433 might represent. A simple, fast-paced game that was played with this deep cultural knowledge. The research that was undertaken in determining the gameplay of this unassuming piece of stone in Haarlem has immense implications for the future study of ancient board games. This is the first time that AI simulated play has been used alongside archaeological methods for identifying a board game. And with this precedent now set, more archaeologists are now able to use this technology to potentially identify even more unusual or uncommon games from ancient cultures all around the world. Not even that, with AI, they can now rebuild playable rules that could give us a peek into real life in the ancient world and connect us with our ancestors through one of the most primal acts that we have as humans: play. Who knew that rolling a die or moving a pawn could connect you to someone a millennia ago? If you want to learn more, the published journal article is free to read, and I've linked it in the description down below. So what do you think of this new technique and the use of AI and technology? Also, tell me what your favorite board game is in the comments. I may not be a board game person, but I am happy to have my mind changed if the right one is out there. And if it's similar to Clue, because that's the GOAT. Stay dirty, my friends.